All right, hello there. Welcome to our humble abode. Today we are going to be cooking up some of these delicious chanterelles that we found in the forest a few days ago now. So we're gonna make a quiche today. Found a nice Swedish recipe online. I am not Swedish, but this seems like it's a pretty simple, straightforward recipe that I've used a few times. So we'll go ahead and start with cleaning these off. Luckily, these aren't too waterlogged or anything, so we're just kind of brushing off any of the debris, any remnants from the forest. If you really want to get a good clean, sometimes you can kind of swirl these around in water briefly. However, you don't want to soak them too long because they will soak up the moisture, and that can really lead to some of that kind of squishy, soggy mushroom texture that folks don't like. Luckily, again, these haven't been rained on or anything, so we're just really going to dust off any debris we see here. And you'll notice I've already done a few pounds of cleaning, so we have a lot of good options to work with here. But here's an example of just kind of cutting off the stem, kind of the root system here, that had a bit more of this kind of before and after here, you'll see. So we're kind of just cutting off this tip, which is a great start, and then brushing off the edges here, brushing off the sides. We'll go ahead and kind of save this one for later. But really, now we have a bunch of delectable morels that we'll go ahead and chop up into some finer pieces before we go ahead and dry saute them and then put them in the quiche. So before we go ahead and saute the quiche, we're going to get the pie crust ready. I went ahead and used store-bought for ease. However, the recipe that I'm using today does have a nice pie crust recipe. Maybe someday I will have the time and energy to make that, but today we're going simple with a nice store-bought crust. Again, just really lining out the edges here. I'm using a cast iron pan in this one, which will be kind of a new tester. And then I also have a nice Pyrex pan, but I've noticed that the crust, of course, bakes a bit differently, so we're going to do a little experimentation here. Really just kind of want to make sure everything is nice and even. You'll see, pretty simple here. Here is the Pyrex option. So again, fairly simple. As long as our pie crust cooperates with us here. I've had it kind of thawing out for quite a bit so that it is malleable. And then we're going to go ahead and blind bake this one for just a bit so that we can get the bottom a bit more baked before we go ahead and put some of the filling into the quiche. Some things I've learned over my trials and errors. I'm not anywhere perfect with the quiche making, but I know that it's helpful to be able to refrigerate this a little bit prior to, just to give it that kind of cold start, and then also pricking it with a fork, and then of course blind baking it with the little baking beads so we can give it the best possible chance. So yeah, with that we will go ahead and move forward.
So when you're cutting your chanterelle, this is kind of there's some stylistic preference, I guess, but it's totally up to you. So a lot of folks, because caps of mushrooms are kind of pretty, I guess, they'll cut off the cap. And then you can kind of just chop up the stem however you like it. I just like it in these kind of little, like, centimeter size, whatever chunks. And then, yeah, so, it's nice to have, because this is all going to reduce. We're going to saute in a sec here, and it's going to get way smaller. So it's nice to have a cap because it retains some, like, form of, underside kind of gill looking like identifiable as a mushroom. And it's pretty, but it is going to reduce. So what I would recommend is cutting off the cap from the stem, chopping with the stem, and then, because this is kind of a thicker one in particular that I'm showing you right now, see, I just cut it into quarters. I cut a smaller one earlier, and I have it in this kind of smaller little piece right here. Yeah, and then we cook them together, and then depending on how you want to do it, if you really want to get fancy, what you might do is cook up all of your mushroom and then keep these guys out of the quiche and put them on top as a garnish. But we don't always feel that fancy, so I don't know if we're going to do that. I'm going to let Tanisha decide because she's the expert quiche maker. Nisha's Quiche-a. It's not called Joe's Quiche-a. But yeah, that's just an idea for what you can do. And honestly, that little trick of holding onto the caps, that works with any mushroom in any recipe. A lot of people do it with cremini and brown mushrooms too. Portobellos, obviously, when you're eating a portobello mushroom, you're never eating the stem. You're almost always just eating the cap. This is a small little cap, so I'm just going to leave that as is because it's going to deteriorate anyway, or reduce. Yeah, and that's how you do it. Next up, we're going to cut some more veggies, cut some more mushrooms, and then we'll show you how to saute.
All right, so now that we have these all cut up, we have them in the pan for about 5 to 6 minutes so that we can get all this water out. We are dry sauteing, and so that means you're just putting the mushrooms directly in the pan, no oil, no butter just yet. So this is to help them soak and kind of sweat it out. You'll see all this water already that is coming out of these chanterelles, so we might go ahead and dump this to the side. Some people use it for stock later on, so you can always repurpose it. But yeah, we think this will be a nice way to kind of help with the texture. And then after that, we'll go ahead and add in some salt, butter, make them taste yummy once we get all the water out. Okay, so now we have the pie crusts that are par baked. We're gonna go ahead and put some Parmesan cheese over the edges here, just to give it a nice little base layer. You can be pretty liberal. Everyone loves cheese. We'll also be using some cheddar cheese. This Swedish recipe does call for a specific type of Swedish cheese that we don't have here in America. So they said that the best substitute is using cheddar mixed with Parmesan. So that's what we're working with. From there, we'll go ahead and layer on some of the mushrooms. You'll see they're nice and cooked. We got a lot of the water out, put some salt and butter in here. These are nice and cooled down, so we can go ahead and layer that like this. And the recipe calls for 4 pounds of chanterelles per quiche. I haven't particularly used that much just because it seems like a lot of chanterelles, but we have a lot to work with today, so it's going to be pretty hearty. Still not 4 pounds worth, but go ahead and fill this up to the brim. And then we'll just go ahead and cover with some more cheese and then the egg mixture, then pop it in the oven. Here we go, final product. After about 25 minutes in the oven, these are all ready to go. We'll just let it sit for about 5 minutes so it could settle, and then it's time to eat. All right, bon appetit.